Tools and techniques, a day in the life of a software engineer. I work as a software engineer. I write code, and I'm looking to talk to you about what it is like being a software engineer and answer any questions that you have. So this presentation is going to discuss what it's like to be a software engineer. It's going to clue you in on some tips that will help you actually do a good job and not get fired 3 months in. Look at a day in your life. So we're going to pretend that you're a software engineer and see what a typical day would be like for you. We're going to look at the skills that you need to succeed in software engineering. And also we're going to have some frequently asked questions before taking some more questions. The FAQ section is going to be things that I wish I'd known before I started my job. And of course, if you do need any questions, please feel free to interrupt and stick them in event text. I don't mind going off on a tangent or seven. So first off, who am I and why am I qualified to talk at you for the next hour or however long? Well, I'm Leo. I've started as a software engineer at Bloom. I've been there for about 2 months. And we're a company that's focusing on building health tech solutions for the NHS. I've worked at Zenith, which is a consultancy company. I worked there as a software engineer for 2 years. Right now I'm the innovation and outreach lead. I develop TypeScript Node backends, and I do internal tooling and that sort of thing. Those of you who know me know that I have a crippling addiction to domain names, and of course I have the crown jewel of my domains is warwick.university. This website is not affiliated with .warwick.university, as well as this Minecraft server is not affiliated with .warwick.university. How many domain names do I have? I think I'm going on 20. I'm not too sure. I think I've lost track of my portfolio a long time ago. I just keep renewing them. I just keep paying the fees. And if you take a look at the photograph on the right, you can tell that I'm an evil genius, the glasses, with a good fashion sense to match. So the first question we need to ask is, what is a software engineer? Well, a software engineer, people think that they say it's a person that engineers software. They're a person that develops, designs, and tests stuff like software. That's unsuspecting victim number one. They develop and test software apps and things. Why am I being asked that? Unsuspecting victim number two. And amateurly or professionally builds software applications in whatever form. Unsuspecting victim number four. We don't talk about what happened to number three. And they're right, but most of the time we picture software engineers as either these incredibly messy people who have 300 million spare computers lying around and use Kali Linux, oh god, or these hipsters who wear rainbow socks and write JavaScript in cafes working on their latest SaaS startup. And in all honesty, it is quite a lot more than that. A software engineer's job can vary from company to company. It can vary from role to role. It can vary from pay grade to pay grade. Some companies have their software engineers write code and work on tickets. So those are more traditional companies, such as The Economist, such as companies like Leo Learning, and most big established companies silo their software engineers and have them write code, and that's good. And then they have other people take care of the rest of the process. Whereas smaller companies such as Bloom and Zenith, the engineers are involved at every step of the process. So the engineers are to some degree involved in the requirements analysis, the architecture, the client handoff, the delivery, the deployments, and so on and so forth. What I do is I write, I deploy, and I maintain code, and I also build internal tooling that the team uses. And on the right here, we can see that often the software engineer could involve stuff like requirements analysis. However, the big bulk of it is software testing, development, testing, deployment, and project management. Some of it could involve code maintenance and working with legacy code bases. And some of it, and the bit that I love the most, involves working in research, development, innovation, open source, and effectively building tools that allow other developers to do really, really cool things. So we're going to pretend that you, after a grueling 2-stage interview, have finally secured a job at Zenith as a senior full stack software engineer, and we're going to follow you about a typical Friday. We're going to you've been at your job for a few weeks, you settled in, you started working on some cool new products or some cool new open source projects, probably Spark, probably some other open source library that we work on, and we're gonna look at you and what you do. So you get up at 8:40, you hit the snooze button on your alarm, and you start at 9. You make some breakfast, you shower, you get dressed, you start your day. And by the time you get all fired up, it's 9 o'clock. Now, between 9 and 9:30, you can check emails from your team, and you can check Slack, and you check all these asynchronous methods of communication. Because everyone's remote, they depend really heavily on communicating with you asynchronously. So you'll be doing something, and they'll send you a message, and you'll respond when you have time, and so on and so forth. And then after you check there's nothing urgent, you can continue with the work that you were doing the previous day. You can check the backlog in Jira. You can pick up another task. And often I find that the time between 9 and half 9 is the best time to organize myself, to make a plan for my day, to check meetings, to check appointments, to book time with clients, to book time with, for example, if I'm working with a larger company, to book time with their project manager or CTO, or to effectively block out time for most of my other colleagues. So if I, for example, want to do something like a peer programming session, I'll say, hey, could we do a peer programming session between 10 and 12, and then between 12 and 1? Effectively, what we do is, it's really, really, really important to block off time at the start of each day, because that's often when you have the best overview of your colleague's agenda, where most external meetings have already been booked and nothing last minute can come up. And yes, Thomas mentions Jira. In my personal and professional experience, if I could describe Jira in one word, it would be dog shit. But sadly, it is the standard for processing. Not for processing, for project management, sorry. And here is a Jira board. If you become a software engineer or a project manager or a software architect or someone even tangentially related to software, or even if you probably work at a company that makes some sort of software product, you will see this thing. And it will be the bane of your existence, and you will regret that you ever saw it. And every time you want to see it, you'll probably want to smash your computer into a wall. But let's break it down. This is a board. A board gives you an overview of different projects. The columns, the grey columns, are statuses. So you've got to do, in progress, code review, and done. Often you'll have many more. So at Bloom, we go all the way from the development backlog to in progress to in code review to in MVP and to requirements all the way to done. And it's up to each business to decide how they use Jira. Some larger organizations have Jira consultants who come in and say, hey, you should be using Jira like this, so it doesn't slow down your organization, and somehow it still does. But effectively, you've got your statuses as your columns. Now, each of these little white boxes are tasks. And a task, as we'll take a look at in a moment, has lots of information, is effectively a self-contained piece of work that can be checked. And these little bits here are called tags. So a tag effectively allows you to assign a particular Jira ticket to a project, for example. So this is an issue or a ticket. At the top, we have a ticket number, in this case, Smart 17. On the side, we have a list of other tickets. We have the title of the tickets. Is there any worse job title than Jira Consultant? Yes, Innovation Outreach Lead. On the side, we have the assignee, i.e. the person who's carrying out or executing the ticket. We have some content, so we have some images, we have we have the scope and requirements, effectively what they're supposed to do. And all of this makes up a Jira issue or ticket. And as a developer, you'll take this information, you'll sit down, you'll produce code, and then your code will be marked against these requirements. And we'll take a look at that in a minute. So often we have work broken down into tasks, and these tasks are carried out during sprints. A sprint is a strict box of time in which a certain amount of work is completed. Now, this allows companies to adjust their requirements quickly if so necessary. And so, for example, you can build a feature within 2 weeks and then rework it in the following 2 weeks. And then you can expand on it in the next 2 weeks. And let's say that you need to open up or you're launching a product in a new market, and you need to rebuild, or you need to build a second or an additional feature. Then you can add that into the next sprint, and so on and so forth. And it allows you to respond very, very quickly to user feedback, to requirements, and to any inputs from your team. Sprints are normally 2 weeks long, although in some companies they can go from 1, and I think Lumo which is a Lumo, which is a cryptocurrency, or Luno, something of the sort. They have 6 week sprints. So it all depends on your project, it all depends on your team, and it all depends on what you're doing. So at 10 a.m. we've got the daily stand-up. So the daily stand-up is where you, your project lead, and other developers on the team discuss what you did yesterday and what you plan to do today. And this is very important for giving your team, or giving visibility to the work that's being done. Because let's say I'm working on feature A, Josh is working on feature B, and then we've got Felix working on feature C. If A depends on B and B depends on C, and there's a hold up with C, the entire process slows down. And so during the daily project stand up, I can say, hey, I'm working on A, I'm depending on Felix for C. What's his status on that? What roadblocks does he have? Is there any way I can drop A for now, for example, and work on C with him to help him work through this? Yeah, flashbacks to deadlocks. Every project hits deadlock eventually. It's painful, and sometimes you just need a project leader or someone like that to actually sort things out. And this now comes to the question: what is a stand-up? Well, a stand-up checks the progress of a sprint. And you can have them daily, you can have them bi-weekly, you can have them weekly, you can, and effectively you talk about what you've done. So in a daily stand-up, you'll talk about what happened yesterday. In a bi-weekly stand-up, that's twice every week, forgive me, you'll talk about what you did in the prior period. So let's say you have a stand-up on Monday because it's the start of the week. And let's then say you have a stand-up on Wednesday. Well, what you can do is on Monday, you can talk about how your work from the previous Wednesday to the Friday went. And then at the, that's on the Monday stand up. And then on the Wednesday stand up, you can talk about Monday, Tuesday, and what you plan to do on Wednesday. Now, I like bi-weekly stand ups because I don't need to get up early in the mornings for stand ups every single day. And also I can get things done. I can remain in contact with everyone else. I can take ownership of my work, and I can speak to people as and when I need. One key thing with software engineering and software development is independence and ownership. You need to own a piece of work that you do, and you need to take responsibility for getting it over the finish line. Obviously, there are prickish companies which will say, hey, you need to take responsibility and work from 9 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock in the evening to get this over the finish line. And I don't agree with that. But while you're working on a particular project, you do need to push through during the day and initiate contact where necessary, do research when necessary, raise issues, and so on and so forth. And another really cool thing that stand-ups allow you to do is they allow you to ask for help, understandable, and also offer help if you need it. So when I speak to my team during a stand-up, I can say, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z. By the next time I see you, I'd like to help this person if they need it, or I'd like to help in this way if I can. And what did you think about the piece of work that I've been doing so far? What do you think about my progress? When do you expect it by? And that clear and open communication is essential for any teamwork. Now, it's 10:20, your stand-up's over, you're done looking at your ugly, tired, exhausted face in the bottom left corner of your screen, and you can now dive right into code. So if you're a back-end engineer, you'll use system design documents that help you plan out that functionality. You can write new tests, and you can verify your code works as expected before pushing to GitHub. And with front-end, instead of a system design document, you'd have a Figma wireframe or a UI design document that helps you lay out the user flow, that helps you identify what you need to surface from your database or from other providers, and that effectively allows you to understand, to visualize your interface before you build it, so you can see any potential problems early. Now, when you build and you develop a service, there are different ways you can do it. Test-driven development involves taking your information in your ticket and converting them to test cases, and then writing software to test to pass those test cases. And it's useful because you have your backend, which is a black box. You put information in, and you can take and you get information out. And you can have some side effects, but effectively, your test-driven development is designed to write code to pass those cases. The big problem with test-driven development is that if your test cases aren't robust enough, then you can end up with some really screwy code. So, for example, if you have a piece of code which says add 2 variables, then what's 1 plus 1? 2. 2 plus 2 4, hello plus world. You haven't accounted for the fact that you need to test whether your variables are most definitely integers or floats or whatever it is, whatever type of number you're dealing with. BDD is a bit different. Behavior-driven development involves writing user behaviors and then writing code to match those specifications. So, for example, given I am a user, when I want to create a new organization, I will click the organization button and the create screen will appear. It lists out a clear BL-SKU pattern, or because leading to therefore, and it allows you to build your UI and your UX to match those behaviors and so that users can effectively behave in or can access your system in particular ways. Now, the problem with BDD is that, once again, if you don't have robust enough personas, so people who use your application, if you haven't considered all those test cases, or all those the people who are using your application, then sometimes people can use your application in very unexpected ways, and that becomes a little bit difficult to deal with, especially once you're in production and you've got your project or your product moving along. So TDD versus BDD. One last slide about this, I promise. With test-driven development, you have unit testing and you have integration testing. So you can test your functions as individual units, but also as groups. And also you can capture the results of functions and their side effects. So you can capture what a function spits out as well as how it alters the database. Whereas with BDD, what you do is you look at the UI, you look at the UX, and you can develop those in lockstep with how you expect your user to interact with your system. It does limit the scope quite a bit, mostly because it keeps what your users expect reasonable, as it were. Nobody's gonna, I don't know, take their iPad, rub it on their tummy and expect your solution to do something magical. They're going to tap a button, and BDD allows you to capture that essence, and it allows you to allow developers to understand it. And I think the cool thing about BDD is it not only, well, developers aren't the only stakeholders who need to, or developers aren't the only ones who need to understand the UI and the UX. Clients often want to be, and if you go into consultancy or if you go into client work or if you freelance, you'll understand and appreciate that clients have no fucking clue what they're doing, but they want to be very involved in the software engineering process, even though they have no clue how it works. And so BDD allows you to say, hey, I've got a shiny document here for you saying, given that a user wants X, we do Y, and I've got some wireframes for you, and I've got some pretty buttons you can click. And you effectively can allow them to feel involved. But you can also allow other people in the software development lifecycle, the SDLC, to feel involved. You've got your project managers, you've got your software architects, you've got your business analysts, you've got everyone understands the language of the tests, and everyone understands what it takes to pass those tests. So, push and pull. Can anybody tell me what this is? What's on the left here? You get points if you do. I don't really have any idea. Automated test build thingies, congratulations, you're correct. This is CircleCI, a tool that's used to automatically build your system. Now, when you release versions of code, often I compare it to a moving bus. You're trying to change the gearbox, the steering wheel, wheels, or the paint job on a moving bus. It's very, very difficult. Or if you imagine a bus driving along a road, if you take a picture every second, the bus will have moved a bit. But if you lay the images one on top of the other, parts of the bus will overlap in that image. And it's a bit like that. With code, you will release new versions, and every single snapshot, if you will push your product a little bit forward. But obviously there'll still be some overlap as your product evolves. And what continuous integration and continuous delivery allow us to do is they allow us to effectively push new versions out and make sure that when we do release new versions of software, the entire system doesn't keel over and die. And it also makes sure that it runs tests in the cloud, so all your test cases are consistent and that sort of thing. So when you use a version control system like Git, what you do is you can push your code up there. Others can access it on their devices and run it locally. And then Jira can say, hey, this guy's made a commit. We'd like to create a pull request to close this issue, and so on and so forth. If continuous integration software is configured, then it runs your tests in the cloud, it lints them, it runs end-to-end tests, it makes sure your code works, and then it can deploy it. So, you've been working really hard, and you can take a break for lunch, you can go to a cafe, you can take a walk outside, you can talk to some of your friends, you can relax, you can take a break from work. And in this case, this is just a nice cheesecake I had the other day. You can when you work from home, you can have cheesecake. And the other day I went on a walk around Coventry. I know it's as scarring as it sounds. And I found a little park, and I think with remote work, at least, you can live life a bit more. And also, just one quick note about productivity. What does productivity mean, or what do you think productivity means? What does productivity look like to you? I've got a grateful audience in the room, so I'm going to engage them. What does productivity look like to you, sir?
Set goals be achieved.
Having set goals be achieved. How about you, sir?
Doing useful things.
Doing useful things. Understandable.
Kind of hard to define.
It is definitely kind of hard to define. Productivity is not whatever the current state of my coursework looks like. Also understandable. Does anybody else have any sort of input? It's different at all times, I agree. The forced productivity phenomenon is increasing pressure on workers to be productive at all times. Between 9 and between 5, you are at work, you must be working. And it comes from managers, it comes from colleagues who may perform really well, it comes from people, it comes from yourself, because you feel like to earn my wage I must work, and it can cause you to burn out. This is what happened to me during my first year of university. I completely crashed and burnt. It was horrible. Don't push yourself too hard. And when writing software, the issue that people don't realize is that it's a very asynchronous process. There will be all sorts of blockers all the time. You will probably need to speak to someone and they just won't be available. You'll probably need to do a piece of work, but the server will be down. You probably might just feel a little bit sad, and you may need to, have a cuppa and get your panda and cuddle, and you can't work yourself to death is the key thing to remember there. If you force yourself to work all the time, you may duplicate efforts, you may make mistakes, you may have to redo work, and effectively, you just accomplish less. You do a shitter job, and you effectively and paradoxically may achieve the opposite of what you wanted. And so this is really important to remember. Forced productivity is a real thing, and don't try to be too productive, because often you will end up burning yourself out. Now, settling back in. You've come back late from lunch. It's 1:10 p.m. You can check your Slack, you can check your emails, you make sure you're not missing anything urgent, you can continue to work on your ticket. If you're blocked, you might spend some time trying to figure out the problem. I had a little joke that a software engineer is effectively a regular person that can Google really, really well, and also is familiar with a couple of basic principles of computer science, but can mostly Google really, really well. You may look for a workaround, you may speak to another team member, or you may try to speed through a particular task, see if you can accomplish it today, and see if you can get that done and pick up something else. And often you will have problems with writing code. This is a rubber duck on your right. It's a lovely rubber duck, and he's called George. Big George. Big George. Now, if you struggle on a piece of backend code, you can often engage in something called rubber duck debugging, where you explain or you walk through the code, often to a rubber duck, but in my case, it's a massive panda wearing a Ushanka, don't ask questions. And you can understand but it effectively involves walking through your code to figure out where the error is and explain your code out loud. Often when you do explain your code loud, you'll realize that you're doing something really stupid. In this case, you're passing in an invalid argument to an incorrectly typed function. And with George's help, you're able to quickly fix the issue and open a pull request to finish this piece of work. Now, shortly after fixing your issue, you get a ping on Slack asking for help from another developer. Now, the thing is, this happens all the time. People will ask you for help all the time, and this is initially it may feel like it's really hard to deal with, and it may feel like it's really, really annoying. At a company that I worked at before, people were really upset that I asked them for help, and I asked them to code alongside with me to help me get a bit more confidence. But it often really does help because you also reinforce principles that you know and understand and learn. And so you can share your screen, you share your device, and you can take turns typing, sharing ideas, debugging the issue, and figuring the problem out. At 3:30, it's time to prototype new ideas. So you can, for example, focus on future tickets as well. You can think about how you're going to implement a new feature. You can go on a walk, you can clear your mind, and you can present something to the team, or you can think about something to present to the team on tomorrow's stand-up. So you take about 10 minutes to sketch out the solution, about half an hour to prototype, you commit, you push your code to a branch, and you can effectively allow others to look at your code, review your code, and give you feedback on it. And at 4:30, you can start winding down, you start planning for tomorrow, you push any code you have to your remote branch so that others who work late at night, because obviously not everyone works during the same time, they can continue to work on it, and so on and so forth. So just from that 10 o'clock or that 9 o'clock to 4:30 day, you will be utilizing a lot of skills. Problem solving, computational thinking, algorithmic thinking, to understand or to effectively write code and understand how a computer thinks, as it were. You'll need to employ some really creative solutions to certain problems. You'll need technical literacy because you'll need to understand the code that you write, but you'll also need to understand the code that others write, and you'll need to understand code that you found on the internet, Stack Overflow, and technical documentation, and so on and so forth. You'll need to have top-notch written and verbal communication. It's very hard to speak to people sometimes. It's very hard to sort of succinctly express what you're thinking, but often you have to communicate whatever problems you're having, or to even communicate good feedback. Because one thing that's really, really important about working with other people is you will need to give them feedback in a way that is not dickish, as it were. You'll need to say, hey, your code has problems, and these are what the problems are, and I'll help you along with them. Or you need to be able to give them praise, even if you don't really like them, or even if you don't get along with them, but you'll need to give them praise, and you'll need to tell them, you've done good on this piece, and you should be proud of yourself. You'll need time management and organizational skills. You'll need to make sure that you can sort yourself out, and that you can effectively plan the amount of time that you can spend working on a task. You'll need pressure and stress management to make sure that your head doesn't explode. You'll also need to display leadership and ownership, because you'll basically need to take a piece of work and get it over the finish line, as it were. Moving beyond that, the challenges of being a software engineer, it's a very challenging job because you need to deal with difficult code under pressure. You may need to debug, you need to work in a team, meet deadlines, deal with very, very difficult clients or managers, work on legacy code, architect and design new code, attend meetings, respond to emails. You need to feel productive, you'll need to battle imposter syndrome, you'll need to do a lot. But it's a very rewarding job, especially when you can help people at scale. That's just my personal experience. I write code that helps change the lives of young children. It's cool, you know. I get to see my work out there making a big difference. You know, I when people say, when I say I work with the NHS, often people assume that I'm doing mission critical stuff, like making sure that Granny's pacemaker doesn't turn off or some other sort. But most of the time, I do really small things and I help people improve their quality of life, and it's cool. Now, a few bits and bobs. These are sort of the overall tips and things I wished I'd known when I was a software engineer, when I was starting out as a software engineer. Any questions so far, by the way? I hope I haven't taken up too much of your time. Please just let me know if you do have any questions whatsoever. Did you take the Hippocratic Oath? Oh my goodness, no I didn't. I can kill people as I see fit. This is brilliant. Thank you. How do you maintain focus with so many modern distractions, e.g. your phone, stroke thoughts outside of work, and general everyday interruptions? Good question. I don't. I think that, once again, being focused ties back into that forced productivity. Focus for this amount of time in the day, and then you can go home. And I don't believe that life works like that. You know, you will get a call from your girlfriend or the bank, or you'll have your post through the door, or your cat will probably shit all over your bed or something, and you'll have to deal with that in that moment. You know, you get up, you want to make a cuppa, you find the milk has gone off, you're gonna pop to Tesco, get the milk, and then, you know, come back and make the cuppa. Or if you're working on a larger piece of code, often you'll sit down and you'll become so engrossed in it that you will keep your focus. Life does happen, and we can adjust our pace. What do you think signifies productivity? getting things done. And it's very difficult to quantify, but measurable by the way that people around you view you and view the work that you do. So, for example, let's say that your boss says you've worked well on this piece, and I appreciate the work that you do. You can, from that interaction, glean and understand that, hey, you are productive. When it comes to forced productivity and when it comes to too much productivity, I think that worrying and worrying about whether you're working too much or working yourself physically sick, not being able to see people or to enjoy company or to enjoy life, is when you sort of start to see forced productivity creep in. I know people at Goldman Sachs who pull some and teams at Amazon who pull some fucking insane work weeks, and it's like, what? How do you? I don't understand how they cope. Tip number 1, you'll feel out of your depth, and it's okay not to know everything, and imposter syndrome is normal and real, and just try not to scream and cry. Good question. Do you think that the huge amount of growth stroke hiring in the tech industry will be slowing down anytime soon? I don't believe so, and I think that the reason, just to answer that question, the reason it won't is because you no longer have it's candidate short. You no longer have, the reason it's candidate short is because, take a look at Tesco. What is Tesco? Can anybody answer that question? What is Tesco?
Shop.
Shop, you say. What is Sainsbury's, for example?
A shop.
A shop, a supermarket. No. God, no. Yesterday I went to AWS Summit, where you've got all of the biggest names. It's a tech company, thank you. You've got all of these biggest names. You've got Kazoo, you've got Sainsbury's, you've got the Prince's Trust, you've got Stop the Traffic, you've got, oh goodness me, you've got HarperCollins, you've got, oh god, I'm trying to remember some more names. I don't think
the guy from BAE.
The guy from BAE was there, but not BAE. You've got public sector organizations, and they are all no longer X companies, but they're tech companies which happen to do X. So I think because everyone or many companies in the market are reorienting themselves as tech companies, it is really, really difficult to find candidates, and because of that, I think that the amount of growth won't stop anytime soon. Even if you exclude venture capital, unicorns, and all that sort of thing, traditional companies are also reorienting themselves really, really quickly. Yes, Tesco Clubcard does steal your data and exchanges it for discounts. And why should I go into software engineering over any other job? I'm not here to convince you to go into software engineering, and you'll see why at the end. But in my mind, at least, software engineering is really, really important because you can do things at scale. I can sit on my ass in my bedroom in Coventry, and I can help, thousands of children in South London. And that's because we can leverage the power of technology to do a lot more, if that makes sense. If you take a look at the way the public sector has also transformed, I met with the AWS NHS lead yesterday, and he was talking about all the amazing opportunities that you can find in the health space because of the fact that people have shifted away from on-premises computing, and they've instead moved to cloud computing, which means that they're able to, for example, hold a lot more data, process a lot more data at scale, and then use insights from that data, or use insights derived with machine learning. Buzzwords, him, not me. But you can use insights derived from machine learning to then turn around and treat patients better. And stuff like that's really cool. And you couldn't do that without technology. A professional certification goes really far. If you want to get involved in a field, consider pursuing a professional certification. I'm working on my AWS Cloud Practitioner certification, and also my Solutions Architect Associate certification. And that's because I want to deal more with AWS services and prove to employers that, hey, I know what I'm doing when it comes to architecting on AWS. And you'll have a variety of professional qualifications. So, for example, with Google Cloud, with Node, with Azure, with pretty much any professional organization you can think of will have their own certification. Cisco, even CCNA and CCNPs, will have their own certifications to say, hey, this guy, this bloke knows what they're doing. Start your own blog about software engineering and write about the things that you find interesting. Write about cool things that you find. Write about how you, I don't know, mapped the area of a shiny rock using cameras. Write about things that engage and that interest you, because the fact of the matter is, if something engages and interests you, it most likely engages and interests someone else. And because of that, you can find and meet people through that. I know that a couple of my best friends I met by writing my EPQ blog and discussing genetic engineering and so on and so forth. She's in Leeds, studying biomedical sciences now. We can meet people in all sorts of ways, and you can also show off your knowledge in all sorts of ways. And this is where writing about software engineering comes in. And it's not really the writing aspect, because I think that starting your own blog is a bit flawed. It can be communicating in any way. It can be starting a podcast. It can be doing talks like this, where you convince people that you're an expert in software engineering, and you can get them to you can talk to them about what you're passionate about and teach them. Contribute to open source while you still can. A good majority of you are in university. Do it. Contribute to open source. Build a project, publish a library, write a line of code, do something. I can't tell you enough to contribute to open source and to do something open source. And the reason you should do something open source is because recruiters and hiring managers and other people will look at that and will sort of evaluate the quality of your code based on that. And unless you've got a good chunk of experience, it's very, very hard to find an in without some sort of code on a public platform. This is what I've found, at least. I applied for a position at a health company, and a core part of my interview process involved making an update to an open source website that I'd published, the fact.space, and they wanted me to add some features and talk through them as if we were handing it over. And then they rejected me, but then they put me through to Bloom. And so contributing to open source and showing that you can code and showing that you can write code is really important, because once you sort of get that contribution graph going, and you say, for example, join an organization that works on GitHub, that contribution graph will sustain itself. But I think that's a key question. That's a key point there. Work on a variety of projects that showcase a wide range of skills. If you do a take-home test, put it on GitHub. Even if you get the job, put it on GitHub, because other organizations can come around and see that you are competent, and they can see that you know how to write code. Sometimes organizations will ask that you don't put their interview tests on GitHub. Respect that. In very rare cases, it allows you to even bypass the technical test step altogether. Set some goals, have a rough life plan. They'll help you decide where to apply, what to do, and that sort of thing. So, for example, SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. These aren't those. I'm talking about overall medium to long-term goals. Where do you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years? I want to own a flat. I want to become a BCS professional. I want to get some AWS and Linux Foundation certificates. I want to found a startup. Those are in the medium to long term. And so let's say, for example, I'm offered a job with a higher pay. That will allow me to achieve goal number 1. Let's say that I'm offered a position where I'm able to get a degree while working full-time, or part-time. That allows me to achieve step 2. Let's say that my company starts a training budget. That allows me to achieve step 3. So don't aim for manna. That's Meta, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Alphabet. Do what interests you as a person. Don't chase the clout if it isn't part of your plan. Amazon reportedly has a 6% attrition rate. It's insane. Yeah, I agree. It is really hard to just blindly work towards something. So often what I do is, if I'll sit down and I think I rank my goals, which I think is the most important thing. And after I rank my goals, I get to say, if I'm given an opportunity, or if something changes, if there's a large change in life, then I can sit down and see how that affects my goals. I write those down on paper. I keep records of them, and then every so often I can take a look at how I'm progressing. And I can, with those written notes, with those tangible things, I can see that, okay, I felt I was here 3 months ago, and now I feel like I'm here. Maybe I need to change. So I think that the process is twofold. or is two-pronged. The decisions will influence what opportunities I take, and then the opportunities that come to me will be influenced by the goals. Large orgs often have better benefits and less flexibility. Startups let you move quickly don't have good benefits. Kind of obvious. Many startups don't have health insurance. They don't give you great parental leave. La-di-da-di-da. If that's important to you, then you may want to look for a large organization. Often you'll very rarely find two organizations or an organization which combines the best of both. If you do and you think it's a good fit and it works for you, grab onto it with both hands and just don't let go. Use the power of puns. Humor gets you places. It helps ease tension in meetings. I agree. The number of puns I've had to make to just make sure that or to get places is insane. Use LinkedIn not only to build, but to maintain professional connections. This is heavily understated, I have to say. Use LinkedIn. Don't be the sociopath who posts, all the time. I got hit by a car. Oops, professional network. Don't do that. Don't do that. But I agree, some LinkedIn posts scare me too. Take time to nurture the connections that you have and to maintain the ones that you do have. Someone interesting may offer you a job one day. Prioritize yourself. Make sure that you're happy regardless of what others say. Other people may say, hey, why are you leaving your job 2 months in? And to that you have to say, I'm fucking miserable here, please. It's all right, you can talk and you can say that I look like a job hopper, fine, but I'm miserable here. Bonuses are nice to have, they're discretionary. If you have a dick of a manager, you might not get it. Don't count on them. Don't make big financial decisions. For example, I don't know, paying for childcare or making your budget balance based on your bonuses, because that's just insane. You have your base salary, work with that. Learn to budget, learn to manage your money, invest in a fuck you fund in case things go south. This is really important. When I say things go south, I don't mean things go sour with your manager, or I don't mean you lose your job. It also involves things like your company going bankrupt, or you getting ill and being laid off because you're unable to work and that sort of thing. Find the big things that matter to you: salary, location, benefits, pension, people, work-life balance, flexibility. If you don't like trees, don't go to work in the forest. It's as simple as that. If the salary isn't paying you enough, if it's, for example, not in a good location, let's say you're in Staffordshire and it's all the way down in Brighton, or let's say it's not remote and you want to be fully remote. If it doesn't have the right benefits for you in your stage of life, if it doesn't have the right pension package, if it doesn't have the right people, the right work-life balance, the right flexibility, if you feel, or if you get the impression from the interview that you're going to be in a micromanaged environment, you're most likely going to be in a micromanaged environment. And if you can't really cope with that, then you shouldn't. Find the small things that matter to you. Work hours, Mac versus Windows. GitHub versus GitLab versus Bitbucket, Mac versus Windows. Some people value more stupid things. It's difficult to develop software on Linux. Linux is nice to run software on, but I find that often I just prefer Mac because it just works a bit better. Find the things that you really hold dear and that you can't, you won't want to compromise on. At one company, I was working from 9 until 5:30 because guess what? Lunch wasn't paid for, and so I had to work an extra half hour in the evening to push for that. And it's like, I really don't want to work from 9 till 5:30. I want to be able to have an organization that's flexible enough, that has some core working hours, which are understandable. And then I can work, for example, in the evenings, or I can work in the mornings. I want to be able to work with the team but still have that flexibility. And that's what my current job affords me, and I'm really happy about it. Figure out what you want to do. What you like doing for fun might not be what you want to do for a job. I learned this the hard way. I went into a front-end position, or I went into a position which I didn't realize was front-end. I thought it was a full stack or a good balance of the two, and it turns out it was heavily front-end, and it made me cry, and it burnt me out, and it was exhausting. And so, if you want to do, if you like doing front end for a hobby, it might not be what you want to do for a profession. If you like doing back end as a hobby, it might not be what you want to do for a profession. If you like doing DevOps or DevSecOps or MLOps, machine learning operations, decide where you want to work. Flexibility, stability, both. Every company is different. You may want the fast-paced environment of a startup that probably sinks tomorrow, or you may want the stability of a large organization, like a large national or international publication. It all depends. You're not fit for every company. Every company isn't a fit for you. This is really important. It's okay to quit during probation. Don't be ashamed that you didn't work with the company, and simply tell recruiters why you left, or tell your next position why you left, because it wasn't a good fit for me, because I didn't like it. Don't forget, companies come in all shapes and sizes, and companies are also structured all differently. You can have a team of 40,000 people and they have teams of 5 and they're very startup-y, or you can have a team of 20 people that works very tight-knitly and very closely together. And it all depends. It all depends, and do your due diligence beforehand. Have patience with the people you work with. Take time to teach them as well as to learn from them. As I said earlier, pair programming and so on and so forth. And simply having a chat can effectively reinforce the knowledge that you have, and it helps you get along better with the people that that you meet. And I think it really does humble you when you hear what people have to say and you understand how they've come to be in the position that they've been in. And it really does humble you when you can honestly say, I don't know, and you can research with them. Attend free conferences related to software engineering. Someone's already beaten me to that photograph. Congratulations. AWS Summit, really cool. I went there. I got to engage with lots of people. I got to rub shoulders with some really nice people from Amazon, HarperCollins, Coinbase, so on and so forth. I got to get smashed on a boat in the middle of the Thames with a bunch of consulting engineers from MongoDB. You can have lots of fun at events. And if you're a people person like myself, the issue that you have is most companies want to isolate their engineering team from their clients, or isolate their engineering team from any direct contact with the end user. And that's understandable, because often the end user can make demands of your engineering team and derail the entire process. Conferences give you the opportunity to go out and get some sunlight, to come out from the basement and to say hi. Touch some grass, exactly. Learn how to use Git. Rebasing, cherry picking, stashing are your friends. Learn how to use Git. Learn how to use Git. Git is really important. Everyone's going to be using Git. Please learn how to use Git. It's a mind-boggling system to get around, but please, I beg, learn how to use Git. An overview of your time at work. Software engineers do quit quite a bit. And I think people should know that they don't stay in one place for quite long. The average turnover is, 18 or so months. So your initial probation lasts between 6 months, 3 and 6 months. You often have limited rights in a 1 week notice period, understandable. In the next 1.5 years, you have bonuses, you have benefits. After after your probation, most of your bonuses and benefits kick in. You've got employer mandated pension contributions and so on and so forth. You also have a more secure job because you have an extended notice period, be it 1 week, 1 month, or 3 months, or whatever. This is the key point. After 2 years, that's when most of your key worker protections, including unfair dismissal protection, except in cases of discrimination, and constructive dismissal cases, can be brought. This is really, 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 really important. If you feel like your employer has forced you out, or if you feel like your employer has become nasty to you, and you are unable to sustain your working relationship, then you are unable to bring a case to the tribunal. From what I understand, you're unable to bring a case to tribunal unless you've worked at that place for 2 years. Some facts. So, what kind of job is right for you? I don't know. What do you like doing? Switch it up a bit. If you're a back-end engineer, try front-end. If you're a front-end engineer, try back-end. Find something that you like, not too much, and do it for a living. If you go with things that you're incredibly passionate about, you may burn out. That happened to me. Don't do it, kids. What should I expect in a salary? Depends. I believe that the current average UK salary after this insane period of inflation stands at 35 grand, if I'm understanding correctly, although in the past it was 27 grand. I believe university graduates out of the gate start out with 38k. Speaking of salary, always discuss your salary with your colleagues, mostly because the only person who stands to benefit from you not discussing your salary is your employer. If possible, join a union. Join a union. Use Git and join a union. 2 things you take away from this talk. Should I take a master's? No. Unless you really like what you're doing, or unless you feel like you want to progress on to further education. Sometimes a master's, to some degree, it doesn't improve your earning potential. Or, it depends. If you want to walk into a room full of people and say, I have a master's, then sure, do it. Should I take a bachelor's? Probably. Take a master's and quit after 2 months? Definitely. What if I don't like my job? Quit. Don't let anyone else tell you to stay in that particular position because you're not. They're not the ones in that position. You know, they are not the ones who have to suffer every day with, I don't know, people who hate them or a job that they dislike. Yeah, also might be good if you haven't secured a good enough job and want another year to try doing an internship. I agree. Should job titles matter? Black, Asian, minority ethnic people, as well as women, it matters to them, or it does more often or more so matter to them because it shows progression and it's something that they can be proud of. When I became a senior at Voxer, when I also became a software engineer at Bloom, when I became I&O lead, I was proud because it's something that I can walk up to people and say, I accomplished this, I did this thing. And it was a really cool thing that I did, and I achieved it with my own blood, sweat, and tears. And so because of that, job titles often do matter. And even though some organizations, so for example, Meta, and other companies don't have seniors and so on and so forth, they have STE levels, those levels also do matter because they show clear career progression. What does an interview look like? Depends on the company. Sometimes it will be a 2-stage thing where you have a conversation and then you can do something technical. Sometimes it will be an introduction, technical test, and then something that is a culture fit or something of the sort. I really don't understand why companies do the culture fit at the end. This is really annoying to me personally. You can write brilliant code. You've invented Git, but I'm sorry, you're just an arrogant prick, and therefore we're not going to take you. You know, intercalated years are actually pretty good. I will admit. You get to do quite a few cool things like travel overseas or something sort, but you know, it's whatever suits you. I don't want to write code, but I want to work in technology. What should I do? Well, lucky for you, there are lots of roles which surround technology. So, for example, you've got software analysts, business analysts, you've got software architects, you've got, I don't know, you've got people who can do who have specialized qualifications for AWS and so on and so forth. Well, we don't want to write code, but they do want to work in technology. They're developer advocates and a bunch of other people. And yeah. So we might be hiring l@voxer.dev. Do you have any questions? Biggest red flags when applying for a company. If a company says that they're very culture oriented but can't define what that culture is. If you have an engineer, if you have a chat with an engineer and they're unable to tell you about one time that they've failed, if engineers and recruiters become outright hostile or combative when you ask questions of them, those are some really, really, really big red flags. And I think while you're at a company, some massive red flags are you're contacted by HR constantly. I think that's a really big one. If your manager can't communicate clearly with you and they instead escalate complaints and concerns directly to HR, that is a substantial red flag because it means that your manager can't communicate with you and he can't do his job, i.e. manage. So those are some massive red flags. Yeah, what are some green flags? That's actually a really good question. I think a company that's willing to negotiate, a company that listens to you, a company that, it's really hard to define. I think a company that where instead of feeling like you're interviewing, you feel like you're having a conversation with them is a really cool one, because you're going to have to possibly deal with these people every single day, and you want to feel comfortable speaking to them. I'm not a fan of the uptight balance. I'm not a fan of the uptight, you wear a suit, you look perfect interviewing style. It's really, really frustrating. And I feel like if you can be relaxed around these people, like you would be attending a stand-up, for example, then go for it. We're a family. Chill nights in the office with pizza. I agree. The problem with companies thinking that they're a family is that they want you to work as if you're a family, but they don't value you as if you're a family member. They're the kind of family that would sell their firstborn child if they didn't dig up enough coal that week. They can be cruel, backstabbing little such and suches, and it's very, very difficult to sort of break away from them if you do ever enter into situation. Also, chill nights in the office with pizza is a good one because number one, I don't want to be spending my nights in the office, and number two, they often think that pizza can make up for a couple of other things, such as a lack of training, or a lack of a training budget, or a lack of a good work-life balance, or lack of flexibility, or hey, we're going to make you slave between 9 and 5 every single day in our central London office where you'll need to pay like 30 fucking quid to even consider driving in. or you'll need to catch a prohibitively expensive piece of public transport. But we've got Pizza Fridays.
I think that was like what it was like my previous role before I got into software, and then obviously with you, Leo, there's so much more flexibility. It's like, for example, we work wherever, whenever, as long as we get the work done. That far outweighs having a ping pong table and a free coffee and free food at dinner time. Like the ability to be able to spend time with your family and stuff, it far outweighs anything that they can put that's shiny in an office, in my opinion, anyway.
I agree. I think that I agree with that. I think that core working hours are really important because people need to collaborate, but otherwise you should be free to work whenever because you may want to do something with your day and work at night. Is it a good idea to work for a very small startup? It depends. Initially, I would say, or when you're starting out in your career, I personally would say no, although your mileage may vary and your experience may differ. I started out in consultancy, which is just a one-person company, and now I've moved to a small company because a massive sort of firm left a bit of a distaste in my mouth. But it depends on whether the position overall is right for you. I worked for a startup. It was a bit of a mess because you don't get training, but you do get a lot of flexibility. It depends. How are you defining training? Are you defining training as organizational practices? Or are you training? Talking trainings in best practices? Because some companies have a training budget, and Zenith has a training budget, and I'm taking advantage of Zenith's training budget. Well, Voxer Zenith has a training budget. I'm taking advantage of that training budget to pursue a cloud practitioner certificate, and then move on to my associate certificate, and I can put those forward and say to people, "Hey, I know how to use AWS, guys. I went to learn about. I went to a conference to learn about how to use technology and so on and so forth." It depends on what kind of backing the startup has, the nature, the industry. It depends on quite a bit, because obviously it's a lot harder to find, a startup that will be able to train you in something like Haskell versus something like TypeScript. Any other questions? Don't be shy. Other people, such as, I don't know, other people, Owen, Max, and Kevin, exclamation mark, please. If that's it, if there are no more questions, which I don't believe there are, thank you so much for your time. Feel free to email me at l@voxer.dev if you have any further questions, or reach out to me on Discord, rawxd1752. Right, lovely. Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate all of your time. Bye for now.